everyone. I am Faradia Alicia, a nighttime storyteller, and I'm here to keep you company tonight. I know many of you use this video to help you fall asleep, so before we begin, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Also, let me know where are you watching from? What time is it where you are? Relax, get comfortable, and let your mind unwind. The house on the hill. That night, the rain poured heavily. Thunder cracked, illuminating the large house standing ominously at the top of the hill. It had been abandoned for years, yet lights inside flickered as if someone or something was still there. Donnie and his three friends Rena, Booty, and Santi decided to spend the night in the house. They thought the ghost stories were just myths. "It's just an old house," Donnie said as he pushed open the creaking door, which seemed untouched for ages. As soon as they stepped inside, an eerie chill wrapped around them. The house was coated in dust, but the furniture remained in place, as if the owners had left in a hurry. In one corner stood a large mirror, surprisingly clean compared to everything else. Rena walked closer and stared at her reflection. Suddenly, she saw something standing behind her, a woman dressed in white. Her face pale, her hollow eyes locked onto Rena's. She screamed and stumbled backward, but when her friends turned to look at the mirror, they saw nothing. "You must be imagining things," Booty said, though his own face had turned pale. Despite their unease, they decided to stay the night. Around midnight, footsteps echoed from the floor above. Curious, Santi climbed the stairs to investigate. At the end of the hallway, she found a slightly open door. With trembling hands, she pushed it wider. Inside, a dusty old bed stood against the wall, and on top of it sat a doll, its button eyes staring blankly. As Santi turned to leave, a whisper drifted through the air. "You shouldn't be here." Santi froze, her blood turning cold. Slowly, she looked back at the doll only to find its head now tilted slightly, as if watching her more closely. A scream stuck in her throat. She turned to run, but before she could reach the staircase, an invisible force yanked her hair from behind. She crashed onto the floor, and just before she lost consciousness, she saw it, the woman from the mirror, now crawling on the ceiling, grinning down at her. Downstairs, Donnie and the others heard a loud thud. They rushed up and found Santi lying motionless. As they tried to lift her, a faint giggle echoed from inside the room. They turned toward the once open door. It was now shut tight. From the tiny gap beneath the door, a pair of glowing eyes peered at them, eyes that did not belong to any human. Without a second thought, they grabbed Santi and bolted from the house. As they ran to their car, a blood-curdling scream erupted from within the house. Donnie risked one last glance back, and there she was, a woman in white, standing at the upstairs window, smiling. Slowly, she raised her hand, waving at them, a farewell, or an invitation to return. They never stepped foot near that house again. But every Friday night, villagers still see a faint light glowing from the windows of the house on the hill. Years passed. Donnie, Rena, Booty, and Santi had tried to forget that terrifying night, but the memories clung to them like a shadow. Nightmares haunted them. Whispers followed them in empty rooms, and sometimes, in the dead of night, they saw glimpses of her, the woman in white, standing at the corners of their vision. One evening, Donnie received a call from a number he didn't recognize. He hesitated before answering. "Come back." The voice was soft, almost a whisper, but he recognized it instantly. It was her. The call ended before he could react. His phone screen flickered, and for a split second, his reflection on the black screen wasn't his own, it was her. Shaken, Donnie contacted Rena, Booty, and Santi. They were all experiencing the same strange occurrences. Doors creaking open by themselves, their names being whispered in the wind. And worst of all, each of them had received the same phone call. It was as if the house was calling them back. Despite their fear, they knew they had to face it. Running hadn't helped. The house had followed them into their lives. So, on a cold Friday night, they drove back to the house on the hill. It looked the same, dark, towering, and waiting. The windows were black voids, but as they approached, a faint light flickered in one of the upstairs rooms, just like before. Taking a deep breath, Donnie pushed open the door. It creaked, welcoming them back. The air was heavy, thick with dust and the scent of something rotting. They stepped inside, and the door slammed shut behind them. The house was no longer abandoned. It felt alive. The walls pulsed as if breathing. Shadows slithered across the floor, and from upstairs came the unmistakable sound of a rocking chair creaking back and forth. They followed the sound, their hearts pounding. At the top of the stairs, the same door Santi had opened years ago now stood ajar, inviting them in. Inside, the doll still sat on the bed, but this time, it wasn't covered in dust. It was clean, almost new, and its head slowly turned toward them. Then it smiled. Rena screamed. The rocking chair stopped, and then, behind them, they heard its footsteps. Slow, deliberate, coming closer. They turned as one. She was there, the woman in white, her long, tangled hair draped over her face, her hollow eyes peeking through the strands. Her lips stretched into an unnatural grin, revealing jagged, blackened teeth. "You came back." The walls trembled. The air grew colder. The door slammed shut behind them. Then, the lights went out, and their screams were swallowed by the darkness. The next morning, the house stood silent once more. The villagers never saw Donnie, Rena, Booty, or Santi again. But sometimes, late at night, passers-by hear whispers from inside the house, and if they dare to look through the upstairs window, they see 4 new figures standing behind the woman in white, smiling, waiting. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. There was no sign of Donnie, Rena, Booty, or Santi. The police searched the house but found nothing. It was empty, no traces of the 4 friends, no signs of a struggle. Just an eerie silence that made the hairs on their necks stand up. But the villagers knew. They knew the house devoured those who entered. And now, more than ever, they saw its windows glowing at night, as if it had new residents inside. Awakening in darkness, Donnie opened his eyes. Darkness, absolute silence. His heart pounded in his chest. Slowly, his vision adjusted. He saw Rena, Booty, and Santi lying beside him. They were inside a small, cramped room with damp, rotting wooden walls. The air was thick with the stench of decay. "Where are we?" Santi's voice trembled. Donnie tried to stand, but a sharp pain shot through his head. He reached out to the wall, but the wood beneath his fingers felt strange, like it was breathing. "Alive! We have to get out of here," Booty whispered. They began searching for a way out, their hands feeling along the walls, That's when Rena felt something. Something moved. She screamed and yanked her hand away from a gap in the wooden planks. Pale fingers reached out, grasping at the air. Fingers that didn't belong to any human. Booty kicked the wall with all his strength, and suddenly, the entire room shook. Not like a house about to collapse, but like something was angry. And in the distance, they heard the voice again. You cannot leave. The endless hallway. Suddenly, a passageway opened in the wall, revealing a long, dark hallway. They had no other choice. With hesitant steps, they moved forward, their feet pressing against old wooden planks that creaked under their weight. The further they walked, the colder it became. The further they walked, the stronger the feeling that they were being watched. Suddenly, Santi stopped. There's something behind us, she whispered. They turned. At the end of the dark hallway, she was standing there. The woman in white. She didn't move, only tilting her head slightly. But this time, she wasn't alone. Beside her, shadowy figures emerged. Their faces were pale, their eyes hollow. Donnie, Rena, Booty, and Santi froze in horror. They recognized those figures. They were the missing people from years ago. And now, they were smiling too. The loop that never ends. They ran. The hallway stretched endlessly before them. No matter how fast they moved, the footsteps behind them grew closer. Suddenly, in the distance, they saw it a door. With their last bit of strength, they pushed through it and stumbled inside. Darkness. When they opened their eyes, they were back in the first room, as if they had never left. Donnie gasped for air. No, this can't be happening. From the shadows, the footsteps echoed again, and the woman's voice was closer now. You belong to the house now. The lights flickered once, then went out. Years passed. The house remained silent, standing atop the hill like a dark monument of fear. No one dared to enter. No one dared to speak of what had happened to Donnie, Rena, Booty, and Sandy. But every Friday night, the villagers saw it, the lights flickering in the windows. And if they listened closely, they could hear faint laughter. Laughter that did not belong to the living. Inside the house, Donnie, Rena, Booty, and Santi still existed. Not as they once were. Not as humans. They wandered the endless hallways, trapped in a nightmare with no escape. The rooms shifted around them, changing whenever they turned their backs. Doors led to nowhere. Windows revealed only darkness. Sometimes they saw their reflections in the mirrors, but the faces staring back at them were not their own. They belonged to her. The woman in white never left them. She was always watching, always smiling, whispering in their ears. You are home now. No matter how many times they ran, no matter how many times they screamed, the house always pulled them back. They were now part of it, and they knew one day more would come. More would be lost. More would join them. A final warning. If you ever walk past the house on the hill, do not look at the windows. If you hear laughter, do not stop walking. And if your phone ever rings in the middle of the night, and a soft voice whispers, "Come back," do not answer. Because if you do, you will never leave. Thank you for listening. And if after reading this, you feel like someone is watching you, do not turn around.